2, 3, 4.
Aloha, everybody, and welcome to the Jason Jones Show. I am your host, Jason Jones, broadcasting high atop the Vulnerable People Project studio, somewhere located mysteriously. It's an undisclosed location in the heart of the hill country of Texas. Today is sort of a last-minute show I really wanted to do because of an experience I had 2 days ago. I was going to the gym, all right, guys, and I was wearing my cutoff shirt, my hat like this, with the bend that tells you I'm a conservative, I'm a Republican, and I probably served in the U.S. Army Infantry. That's what this bend should tell you. And but I was wearing my shirt into the gym, by the way, filled with guys in cutoff shirts working through their midlife crisis like me, most of them on testosterone replacement therapy. But the only difference is I was wearing a shirt that said resistance on the back with a Palestinian flag. And do you know, but just as I pulled into the gym, I get a text from who's our guest today, from my dear friend who's our guest today, Khalil Sayegh. And Khalil texted me something he saw on X. He said, I really fear we're seeing the rise of genuine, authentic anti-Semitism. We really need to respond. And that was that. And I said, I agree, brother. We need to respond. And I walked into the gym. So I go into the gym, and a gentleman, and he was a gentleman, he came up to me and he said, I really find your shirt confusing. I don't understand. What are you resisting and what are you trying to say? Now, mind you, I wore the shirt to the gym because I wanted to confuse people. I wanted to wake them up. And I would hope someone would talk to me. And sure enough, I'm in the gym like 8 seconds, and this gentleman comes up to me. And I share, well, what are your opinions on the subject? He begins to share his opinions. He's a Christian Zionist. He's a new Christian, older guy in his late 60s, but new Christian. And he was sharing with me his theology and his opinions. I said, it sounds like you watch Fox News. And he said, that's all I watch. I said, that's probably the problem. And then we had a long discussion. And at the end of the discussion, he's like, I really think maybe I suffer with bigotry. Oh, but before that, I said, can I show you what my Palestinian Christian friend from Gaza sent me? Because a lot of what this gentleman was concerned about was anti-Semitism and Jew hatred. And when he saw me walk in with this shirt, he just assumed I probably didn't care too much about Palestinians. I just used Palestinians as a shield to express the hatred of Jews, which is, I hate that idea because what the state of Israel does has nothing to do with Israelis generally, but of course not Jews and around the world. So, but regardless, we had a beautiful conversation and it ended really well. And so I reached out to Khalil. I said, I'd love you to have you on my podcast. We need to do it soon because I'm about to hit the road again and be on the road for a couple of weeks. So my friend Khalil Sayegh, I'm going to have you tell you a little bit. I'm going to have you tell him about himself, but he runs an amazing nonprofit. He's been a voice for peace and civility in the midst of chaos and cruelty in the ethnic cleansing that's taking place in Gaza. He's been impacted directly. So with that, I'd like to welcome to the Jason. Before I do, this episode is being brought to you by the Vulnerable People Project. We stand in solidarity with the most vulnerable people in the world. This week, we're preparing to send body armor to our security guards in Nigeria. And we have sent pop-up homes to 70 Catholic families in Gaza. And probably about a week after Thanksgiving, every Christian in Gaza and also the orphan communities will have pop-up homes provided by our donors. And if that sounds like something you want to be a part of, go to vulnerablepeopleproject.com, click on the donate link on the right, and become a monthly donor or give your best one-time gift. All right, here we go. Khalil Sayegh, welcome to the Jason Jones Show.
Thank you, Jason. It's always good to be with you. Looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, brother, I just love you so much, man. When we went, I don't want to, I think we need to set the stage, but when you and I went to Egypt together to facilitate the evacuation of wounded women, pregnant women, children, and families, some Christian, some Muslim, in Egypt, I was like needling you. I don't know if you knew, but I was like kind of testing you, not for bigotry. And I realized later, and I wrote an article called "Help, I'm an Anti-Palestinian Bigot." It was because I was a bigot. And I just assumed that if you were Palestinian, you were probably an anti-Semite. And what shocked me, not only with you, but with families that were brutally wounded, lost closest family members, as you have, showed such a graciousness, a kindness, a humanity, and a dignity that to this day it's still breathtaking to me. And I find the Palestinian community the most maligned community on earth, and also probably the most beautiful community on earth. Can you set the stage for us, just a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and your background? And then I want to move into, since the beginning, since the day you and I first met, we have been talking about the day will come when we're going to have to fight Jew hatred, and the day has come. So I know that's a lot I just threw
Yeah,
at you, but
yeah, for sure.
set the
Yeah,
stage.
no, happy to to answer. Was born and raised in Gaza. Everyone now knows Gaza due to the genocide. To a small Christian Palestinian family that experienced the ethnic cleansing in 1948. So our village was within what's known as the boundaries of the state of Israel, and my grandparents were forced out of their home. Property was confiscated by the new created so-called Jewish state. My family has suffered tremendously during that period, and then also during this last war, genocide. As you know, my sister, my father, both were killed in Gaza, and I, have been impacted by that, and my other friends have been killed in Gaza, etc. I moved to Washington, D.C. to study political science for my grad work in 2021. Then I stayed here, worked in different organizations around religious freedom and right of persecuted Christians in the Middle East, etc. And then I founded the Agora Initiative, a group that works with Palestinians and Israelis to work toward two-state solution and toward a future in which there is no occupation, there is no violence, and there is equality and peace and justice in Israel and Palestine. And as you mentioned, one of the things that have always been in the back of my mind as this genocide unfolds in front of our eyes, and as the Jewish Zionist organizations in the U.S. and in Israel really connect deeply all the actions of Israel with the Jewish community. I mean, A, they call themselves the Jewish state, and then B, all these organizations call themselves, Jewish names. And then they would say, that any criticism of Israel is actually criticism of Judaism, or it's like anti-Jew hatred, or it's anti-Semitism, and that has been always concerning to me because once you start conflating both, you'll have two things: either people will go silent for a while because they can't, they don't want to become anti-Semitic or sound anti-Semitic, or the other reaction that could happen over time is that they would say, well, I would just become fully anti-Semite. If you're calling me anti-Semite, no matter what, this will cause me to just come out and be fully anti-Semite. Or all sort of new, ideological, uh, 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 genuine anti-Semitism is emerging due to the fact that people have started seeing horrific things and start connecting directly between the state of Israel and the entire Jewish people. And that is concerning, Jason. And we talked about it while we were in Egypt, and that phenomena wasn't as prominent
And
as
this
now,
was 2 years
but
ago.
now
I
it's
mean,
growing.
this was
Exactly.
almost 2 years ago when we were talking about this.
Exactly. At the beginning of the genocide.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, it's funny because not funny, haha, but it's just strange. I've watched you. I laugh every time. I take pleasure in it actually because it happens to me. And so when it happens to other people, I feel good. But I watch people call you a Hamas apologist,
Yeah.
Zionist on the same thread on X. And it just makes me chuckle. It's like, wait, what in the world? What kind of world do we live in that you can have two groups attacking my friend Khalil on the same comment? Some saying you're a Hamas apologist, the others saying you're a Zionist.
It's
And
actually
I
funny.
struggle with, I don't want to appear
Yeah.
sanctimonious. I genuinely don't want any community to be savaged, to be besmirched. My number one rule is don't say anything that if a child heard it, they would be scared.
Yeah.
Don't say anything about the Palestinians like Congressman Fine would say, nuke Gaza,
Yeah.
that would scare a
Despicable.
Palestinian child or make them feel fear, alienated. Don't say anything about the Jews if it's going to make a young child who's Jewish feel fear. This is like a simple rule. Don't say or do anything that would scare a child about the community you're speaking of. Number one rule. But I think we may come across sanctimonious. Like you got to pick a side. pick a side. I'm picking a side. Women, children, human dignity, civility. Is this something you
Absolutely.
wrestle with as a Palestinian when your loyalty to the Palestinian cause is questioned when you speak out against Jew hatred?
Absolutely. When October 7th happened and it was horrific what happened there, I had to look at myself in the mirror and I would say I wouldn't be a true Christian and a true principled person if I see the Hamas have killed civilians, including women and children. 35 children were killed and about 200 women. I wouldn't be a true to myself if I'm silent. And I chose to speak up and I chose to speak against Hamas. And then when Israel started committing the wars in Gaza, I decided that I'm also going to speak about that. And it's ironic, actually, that I actually had this right-wing Israeli organization called Bitar. It's a famous one that's advocate for deportation for people who are critical of Israel, tagging the FBI in many of my posts and saying, deport that guy. They made a post about me. I'm like, he's a Hamas supporter. I'm like, okay, that's funny. I'm not Hamas supporter, but take whatever you want. And then I had literally the Hamas newspaper, Quds News, run a whole thread on me last week in which they called me funded by AIPAC, ADL, and other Zionist groups, which was hilarious. And all of that because I'm critical of Hamas. So I have it from both sides. And it's hard to be right in the middle and not to have a tribe. And this very polarizing situation. But as you said, the issue that we're dealing with right now is that this 2 years of genocide and 2 years of really conflict has start leaking into U.S. political culture. And we start seeing, we saw genuine Palestinian hate where even a man grabbed a knife and killed a Palestinian child in Chicago at the very beginning of the genocide. And now we're seeing rise of antisemitism. And if we are consistent with our value, I mean, even let's put aside whether we're Palestinians or Americans or white or black, just as Christians, right? If we're consistent with our values as Christians, we cannot accept the premise that some people, based on their genes or based on their religion, are all evil or that they are bad. And it scares me to see all these comments on online and other spaces where people talk about the Jews and really very creepy and clearly, anti-Semitic way. And in the same way, it would scare me if they're talking about the Palestinians in this way.
Yeah, I see it as the mimetic rivalry between Zionism and anti-Semites, and it's as if they're in this competition.
Mm-hmm.
And it's striking to hear people like, and this is what scares me about the youth in America, when you have people like Congressman Fine and Douglas Murray and Mark Levin say the most vicious, Ambassador Mike Huckabee, genocidal language, virulent language against Palestinians, and then criticize Nick Fuentes for being an anti-Semite. If I'm a 17-year-old boy, I'm going to laugh at the Mark Levin wing of the GOP. And this is the fear. We see they use the same types of language, throwing back and forth at each other accusations, but both of them are using dehumanizing languages about an entire ethnic community. And then there are those of us that are stuck in the middle. Now, I want to call you on something. You said that you chuckle. I have an American passport. I'm a blonde-haired, blue-eyed Republican, 50-year-old Catholic grandfather. Okay, I chuckle when they, we were criticized for evacuating, potentially mortally wounded women and children as ethnic cleansers. That we were, I was attacked. People said, by you evacuating to hospitals, Palestinians, you're an ethnic cleanser. Like, I didn't even see that coming, So you said you chuckle, but you're in a precarious situation. Do you really chuckle? Or when you see accusations from Zionist groups tagging the FBI and then saying, send him back, and Hamas effectively saying, come back and we'll kill you, do you chuckle?
I'll be honest. Sometimes, yes. I'm not going to lie and try to pretend that I'm fearless. Fear is a real feeling, and you face it sometimes. And many times, I find myself thinking, of the worst case scenario, right? A situation in which, you are forced to be deported to the Zionist, attacks on you. And you know what is awaiting you there. Hamas would kill me. It's not even a question.
You've been in Hamas has imprisoned you before. Yes.
Yeah, they imprisoned me 3 times when I was a kid. So imagine now, after all this platform that I had and speaking against them, etc. So it would be dangerous. That being said, I think I made my conscious and my decision with myself, and I have peace that I'm doing the right thing, and whatever will happen will be God's will. So if that comes, I should be ready for it. I personally don't think it will come. I think that I have enough friends and I have enough support that will be my voice, like you, Jason, and others, that in the case something like this would happen, that will speak directly to the government in the U.S. to ensure that my dignity and basic freedom of expression and religious freedom is protected. So I'm really still trusting in the American Constitution and government that it works and it would help me against all these vicious attacks. So I think that I have peace. I've made peace with that possibility, though.
So can you give us your practical thoughts on how we can advocate for the dignity of the Palestinian people while combating the rise of Jew hatred and anti-Semitism?
I
Yeah,
think the
I
first
don't
line.
want to dampen my witness for Palestinians, while at the same time, I don't want to inadvertently aid and abet the rise of a hateful movement. And so this challenge that we face. And,
I think
I would like to know your thoughts on how we can do that.
I think the first line, Jason, is that it's what is going on is an brutal, illegal, immoral occupation by the Israeli state against the Palestinian people. But it is important to say that although the state claims to be a Jewish state itself, it does not represent all Jews in this world. And even if it claimed to represent all Jews in this world, big chunk of Jews in this world reject the idea that the state of Israel represent them. And therefore, when you have this realization, you will understand that not all Jews support what the state of Israel does. The other thing to also acknowledge, that even when some of the Jewish Americans support the occupation and the state of Israel, etc., it's not always because of like some sort of villain, bad motives that they hate Palestinians or hate the others, etc. It's most of the time the same as why Christian Zionists support the state of Israel, in the sense that it's propaganda, it's misinformation, it's misconceptions of theology, etc. And when you keep these two things on your mind, I think you'll have more grace to talk to your Jewish friends, brothers and sisters, neighbors, and understand them more. But I think in addition to all these things, there is this anti-Semitism that is clearly being more or less correlated with the genocide in Gaza and the occupation. But there's also genuine, um, um, what I would call, classic anti-Semitism that we're seeing on the rise. And that is a different type. It's not related to the conflict itself. It's this whole idea that there is something uniquely about a Jew that is, about their genes or about their religion or about them as a group, that is a super villain. That is, that they somehow possess a certain power to control this industry or that industry or control the entire American politics. And that cannot be farther from truth, Jason. Although there is a lot of lobbyist group on the pro-Israel group that make this conspiracy theories almost sounds true, but there is a fine line between this conspiracy and between the truth. I think that we have to really walk very
Can I
finely.
walk
So how
that
do we?
fine line a little and risk canceling myself? I mean, let's talk about some of the truth. Like, I think the
Yeah,
truth is the Jewish community coming out of Eastern Europe, especially Russia and Ukraine, and then obviously the catastrophe of the Holocaust, is hyper vigilant. At least there's a small, and some of them are my dear
yeah,
friends. They're a small community of Jews that are wealthy and powerful. I have friends in this community who are hyper vigilant about preserving Jewish safety and security. And this comes out of not an irrational fear. And so they do work to assert power and influence for the security of the Jewish
absolutely.
community. So that's true. Number two, you can look at Hollywood, and people say Hollywood is dominated by Jews. It is because of anti-Semitism. Thomas Edison tried to close out that whole industry. I think it was in New York and New Jersey to Jews. And the Jews said, we're getting out of here. We're going to go somewhere they can't even see us. And we're going to make movies ourselves. And that's that. So, okay, you can't get angry at a community that fled prejudice and started an industry and succeeded. And then you shouldn't be shocked if it has the values of that community. But I would
Absolutely.
say, like Manny Patinkin and others, some of the loudest, most beautiful voices for the Palestinian people are Jewish. In fact, I wrote an article called How the War in Gaza Has Made Me a
Hmm.
Philo-Semite. I don't know if you saw it.
I saw it.
I have Jewish cousins and Jewish, but I've never had any special affection. Like, I've never been like, an Eric Metaxas, like I love Israel kind of guy. But something has really happened with this war that I look at people like Dave Smith and Manny Patinkin and Norm Finkelstein and Noam Chomsky. Many of them I would disagree with ideologically and politically on
Yeah.
so much.
Yeah.
But when I look at their heroism and their courage and they're willing to risk, I'm just in awe. And again, and I've said this to a friend of mine who owns a hamburger shop, Dave. He's got the coolest Instagram page. He's a Jewish guy, so full of life. I mean, I fell in love with him. I went to meet him. I went to his place in New York, in Brooklyn, to have a burger. I literally fell in love with the guy. I had a man crush. And his family, he has Israeli family members. He was raised in a Zionist family. And when you just see, I said to him, don't be offended by this, but there's a Jewishness in your prophetic witness. There's something about your advocating for Palestinians that's different than my advocating for Palestinians, and that I can feel it coming from Mount Sinai through the prophets across the centuries into my ears. And so it has really made me a philo-Semitic Semite, but in a way, but there's this mystery that when it comes to Palestinians and Jews, collective punishment's acceptable.
Yeah.
Don't accept collective punishment for the Chinese or for the Russians or for the Germans, but as a world, and they're Semitic peoples, but it's like, you know what? Collective punishment to Jews, okay, on the one hand. And the other side is like, no, but collective punishment to Palestinians. Well, what we're saying is, no, we don't believe in collective punishment. Why is it that Palestinians and Jews are the two communities? Have you ever thought about this where collective punishment's acceptable?
I don't have an answer, like necessarily. I think the issue, though, with the Jews, that they have been historically otherized in Europe and in the Western world generally, and therefore, they were scapegoated, and that's historically, basic history. It's not like it's just like a mystery or anything. Everyone knows that, and that's true. And I think there's something about the victims of the Holocaust and the victim of discrimination for so long, that these being Jewish Israelis, sort of reflecting the same experience that they've had on the Palestinians. Not that I'm saying necessarily there is a Holocaust in Gaza. I think there is a genocide. It's debatable if it's a Holocaust, right? I don't think it is. I think it's a genocide. It's awful enough that it's a genocide. But I think there is this tendency where Israelis have sort of became, as Edward Said puts it, actually, the Palestinians are the victims of the victims. I mean, we are the victims of the Israelis. And I think both sides in the West are trying to rationalize that, right? Those who are, of European heritage, and, they understand that their ancestors have all this, beef with the Jews, and there is history of antisemitism, etc. Try to solve it by only, supporting Israel. Well, we support Israel, so we're good, and we are going as far as even, supporting collective punishments against the Israelis. And then the other side, who doesn't like the Jews, seem to just be pushing the same thing. They don't seem to care about the Jews or their safety or well-being. That's the thing, Jason. There is many criticism you could have of Israel, and you should. And there's many criticism you could have of what's so-called the Zionist lobby in the U.S., and you should. These are, I would argue they are not only running against the interest of the Palestinians, but against the interests of the United States of America itself. But that's different than going and say, hail Hitler, or like Hitler team, or like Hitler was right, or like Jews weren't really killed in the Holocaust. All of which, for example, Fuentes has said, all of which concern me myself. That's different, for example, than someone like Tucker Carlson, who is genuinely and clearly principled on his criticism and focuses on the state of Israel, and he just want to give platform to everyone. You can't just call Tucker an anti-Semite. I haven't seen any evidence for that.
Tucker Carlson is not an anti-Semite. It's absurd. And this
Yeah,
meme now that it's this civil war on the right between Nick Fuentes and Ben Shapiro.
yeah,
No. And again, this is going to lead to anti-Semitism with young people, because if young people have to choose between Nick Fuentes or Ben Shapiro, I can guarantee you, I bet my life it's going to be Nick Fuentes. Now, look,
That's true. That's true.
the reality is we've been scandalized by Gaza, but especially Gen Z, because they're stuck to their phones. And it is not, the civil war on the right is over Gaza. Mamdani won because of Gaza. In fact, I had a Substack that came out last week that Mamdani will destroy New York's economy and save America's soul.
Wow.
Because I think he's going to really, socialism doesn't work, but Mamdani's a beautiful human being. And he's going to signal to, and then the Republican catastrophe that happened last week in the election, that Mamdani is going to signal to any ambitious politician, I don't care how much AIPAC wants to throw at me, I need to skate away from this genocide as fast as I can. So it is really going to feed anti-Semitism. The Israeli lobby trying to point to those of us who have been shocked by the genocide. In fact, the first thing I did, I hate saying this, because at the end of the day, I don't care what people say about me. And I would hate to undermine the communities I serve to defend my reputation. But the reality is, just so you know, the first words, God forgive me, Khalil, when I saw the footage of October 7th unfold, the first words, I didn't say it out loud. There's no record of this. No reason for me to say this. I'm not trying to defend myself. This was just a thought that went through my head. Flatten Gaza. My little Randy Fine whispered in my head, and I was like, whoa, hey, slow down, cowboy. Don't think like that. But I'm a human. I was emotionally disturbed so much by that. Like this went through my mind. And but the reality is the opposite's going to happen now is everyone sees the footage as the reporters are pouring into Gaza. The world is going to have that same reaction that we had to October 7th, but it's going to bleed out over months and years, because I think Israel is making a big mistake and not allowing everyone in immediately, because just the cost of this war, it's going to drip out over years and years and years. And this election ended it. Would you agree? This election ended it. So they just need to tell the truth. Our response to October 7th was catastrophically undermine Israel's interests, made the world unsafe, and was a crime against the Palestinians. Just accept it. If they want to try to make this out about, if you oppose the genocide, you're anti-Semitic, then like you said, young people are going to go, oh, I guess I am.
Exactly. That's how it goes. That's how it goes. And that's why I think that us, those who have, still adhere to basic Christian ethics and basic, values, I think, have to have we have to just work to have our voice be heard and speak up and not be afraid, and at the same time have the mercy and the grace to accept those who are returning, right? Like someone who was supporting the genocide and he's returning back. I think we have to have the room to say, okay, you're welcome back. We are not going to hold it against you. Someone who is have been flirting with anti-Semitism and he's just regretting it and coming back, we have to also say welcome back. The most, I think, dangerous thing we could do to ourselves and to the society and to everything that's going on around us is to try to push this whole notion of cancel culture. I mean, when the whole cancel culture in the US became a thing during the Black Lives Matter, etc., I was in my apartment in Palestine. I was still there. I have lived 6 months before here serving at a small church in Virginia. Went back to Palestine. I was watching on live on my laptop what's going on and all this craziness of cancel culture. I was like, how is that making any sense? Like they say it's all about people of color. It's not. It's actually undermine even the people of color or even people who look like me. And it's the same on the right now. You cannot just cancel others fully. What you have to do is just have the conversation, be brave about it. And then when people change their opinions, you have to welcome them back. You can't cancel someone.
I wish you didn't say that. Now I have to go delete my X post from last week where I said, when it comes to the genocide in Gaza, I'm a Montanist. No forgiveness given. So I have to retract that. But you're right. And I just said that because I was angry. But because they're going to come back, and it's going to be for the wrong reasons, but whatever. We do need to give people grace. And and I'll be clear, if I'm going to be honest or transparent, my greatest concern isn't the plight of the Palestinians or the plight of the Israelis. I think virulent hatred in the political life of America, Jew hatred, the vile rhetoric where a recent public official said about immigrants crossing the southern
Yeah,
border, it's a
yeah,
sea of refuge. No, he called it a sea of refuse, sludge pouring across their
yeah,
southern border. Or people like Randy Fine saying nuke Gaza. A prominent conservative leader told me that we should turn 2 million people in Gaza into pink dust. So my greatest concern isn't the people of Gaza, forgive me, or the people of Israel. It's my grandchildren that are going to live in the political society that this rhetoric's going to create. And I don't want my children and grandchildren to live in a political community where elected officials can say what Fine says comfortably with no fear of retribution, where people
totally.
like Mark Levin or Ben Shapiro say the most vile, hateful, bigoted things. And it's not even called out because we're so bigoted. We're so bigoted that when people say the worst things about Palestinians, they go, well, that's not prejudice. That's true, And I
It's
don't want my
definitely true.
children to grow up in that community because do you know, my grandfather never imagined that he would have Filipino Chinese grandkids. And I never imagined that my grandkids would be Guatemalan. And I shouldn't be surprised if my great grandkids are Palestinian or Jewish. And so why would I want to encourage rhetoric that's going to poison the environment of my grandchildren?
That's totally true. And I think we're seeing this creep on the, like, I mean, it's generally the sense in America that's growing, but especially in the right, and we have to be very honest with ourselves that this is a problem. That's an issue. As you said, it's not only bad for the war, it's bad for America and the American future.
And you know what? I liked when Tucker, he's being criticized for talking to interviewing Nick Fuentes, but I have less hatred to Nick Fuentes than I do Mark Levin. Nick Fuentes is a young man. When I
Yeah,
was Nick Fuentes' age, I was like drinking every weekend night, carousing, atheist. I was a young man when doing what young. I was an Ayn Rand objectivist because her morality fit perfect to my ethics. Her ethics fit perfect to my inclinations. He's a young man, and he's actually on the like the losing side of history, although tragically it's on the ascent, right? But when you have Mark Levin, he's speaking crassly about a community that's being ethnically cleansed right now, and he
totally.
is an old man. He should be wise. He
Yeah,
should be thoughtful. So I'm going
yeah.
to hold an old man with wealth and power to a different standard than a young, aggrieved, abused young man. And I'm going to
Yeah,
hold them to
that's I
different
think the
standards.
the other thing, right? The other interesting thing, Jason, is about Fuentes' journey. Like, how did he become the person he is? I mean, if you watch the interview with Tucker, and I don't believe in cancel culture, so I watched it. I'm not gonna like be scared. If I'm scared to watch something, it means there's something wrong with me, right? Like,
We
why
want to
can't I hear
rescue
this
young
guy, even if
people.
he's an anti-Semite?
Nick
He,
Fuentes, you need to watch it because Nick Fuentes represents millions of young men.
Exactly, yeah. So when I listen to him and like he goes through the whole journey of how he was like young activist and the conservative side, was approached by the Daily Wire, asked to work for them, and then when he started questioning the whole support for Israel, they just like called him an anti-Semite, etc. And the whole thing, like Nick Fuentes' story is literally the story of millions. You're calling us anti-Semites because we're questioning things about Israel, therefore we will become fully anti-Semite. And that's, I think, if you don't learn, the problem with the other side, the pro-Israel side, is that they don't want to learn from that experience. They don't want to learn that you cannot just cancel people and call everyone anti-Semite and then not expect a wave of anti-Semitism coming as a result of that. That the funny part is that the conspiracy theory about the Jews says that Jews control everything, which is we both know it's not true. And then if someone says something wrong about Israel, then the Zionist lobby would say, well, you
Debank
can't have a
them.
job now. You
Jews
can't have
control
a
the
life.
banks.
Exactly. So
He
you
said
sort of
something
shut up.
against Israel. Cancel his banking account. Well, that sounds like a dumb
Exactly.
plan.
So it
Yeah.
makes people, it proves people's first intuition. And only like it takes a lot of wisdom, I think, for like someone like you and others to understand that despite what seems like a paradox, the conspiracy theory is not true.
Well, and look, and now they're trying to cancel Tucker, and then the head of Heritage that
Yeah,
supported Tucker. And if they cancel the head of Heritage, watch what happens. It's going to be pandemonium.
he
But
he actually just walked back his statement today
heartbreaking.
privately.
You have Tucker sitting down. I wish Tucker would have been even more fatherly, more fatherly. But he said this is incompatible with our faith as Christians to be bigots, to be
Yeah,
racist, to be prejudiced. Tucker's engaging. He wasn't just engaging Nick, who, by the way, is a human being. He's a real person that had a real life. He's engaging with a real young man, but
exactly.
his audience was watching as well. So when Tucker was saying to this young man, Nick Fuentes, our faith, we're made in the image and likeness of God. Everyone's made in the image and likeness of God. He was talking to millions of young people who identify with Nick, and he was trying to rescue them. You could see this.
Yeah,
But they're mad that he had empathy. The idea isn't that he was trying to rescue them. God forbid we have empathy for young men who've been brutalized and aggrieved, who've been told they were racist, sexist, anti-Semitic, homophobic since they fell out of the womb. I wasn't told that. All my heroes were, white guys, and we celebrated Columbus Day, and Columbus Day wasn't a day to tell me my ancestors were awful. It was a day to dress up as a pilgrim at school and eat candy, And so Nick Fuentes' generation, and I know this because my young mixed race kids talk to me about how their generation perceives Nick. And
wow.
it would be shocking. It would be shocking. You'd ask any 17-year-old, how do you perceive Ben Shapiro? How do you perceive Nick Fuentes? And then I think people are going to be shocked. And it was actually a black friend of mine who said, Jason, because I was I was railing against this Nick Fuentes. I was railing against him. And my black friend said, your two biggest heroes in this world are Malcolm X and Muhammad Ali. They were racialists. How could you forgive them and respect them? I said, well, they transcended it. And my black friend said, Nick will too. He's young. I said, but they were aggrieved. Malcolm X's father was pulled across the train tracks by the Ku Klux Klan and cut in half. That would radicalize a young man. So they were attracted to the Nation of Islam, which was effectively an ethno-nationalist cult, right?
No, of course.
It was saying black people are superior to white people. I could see how a young, aggrieved black man who was told he was ugly, he was stupid, he was inferior would say, hey, I found my religion. This is good. I'm the best now. And he goes, well, you don't understand. That's how Nick's generation of young white kids feels.
Wow.
And you better show them empathy so you can understand them and speak to them. And let's hope that they will transcend their experience the way we were able to see Muhammad Ali do. And at the same time, Malcolm X was doing as he would right before he was tragically gunned down. And so this generation has been aggrieved. And so God forbid we cancel Tucker Carlson for sitting Nick Fuentes down and saying, hey, our faith doesn't allow for racial prejudice or anti-Semitism. We believe all people are created in the image of God. But we want to cancel this guy now?
It's insane. It's really insane.
Well, can I tell you, as a Palestinian, when you speak out against anti-Semitism, I have noticed that the people that attack you are actually from the Zionists and from, I don't want to say it this way, but the white left that weaponize the Palestinian grievance to serve their own political objectives. That's how I see it. Or am I seeing it through a conservative?
No, that's totally true. No, it's true. When I criticize anti-Semitism, usually, the left, like the fragile, like fringes of the left, argues like there's no such a thing. It's all like made up by the Zionists, or like there is no genuine anti-Semitism anywhere. And some on the right who are actual anti-Semites would also criticize me, and very few Palestinians actually, because Palestinians understand that anti-Semitism is bad, generally speaking, and understand the distinguish between Judaism and Zionism. Now, obviously, you'll find anti-Semitism even in Palestine or any other place, right? But yeah, generally that has been the responses I get, and others, who are on my side sometimes wouldn't criticize me for uh, uh, anti-Semitism per se, but just would criticize me for wasting my time on it. They go like, they're in very competitive mood. They're like, they're fighting us, they're whatever. Why would you spend time defending them? Just let them be. So these are the kind of reactions I receive.
And you said something to me on the Jason Jones show once. I asked you, the reality is they use the book of Genesis to justify the ethnic cleansing. They'll
Hmm.
appeal to scripture. And I said, well, why don't the Palestinians appeal to scripture? You're the genetic descendants of Abraham. Palestinian Christians are not only the genetic descendants of Abraham, um, through two streams, but they are also, according to the New Testament, the new Israel.
Yeah,
So you're the descendants of the apostles. Your ancestors were in the upper room. And I asked you, how come you never appeal to this? And do you remember what you said?
I can't remember now.
Sometimes I give the best answers. People go, that was brilliant. I'm like, I don't even remember saying that. You said, Jason, we wouldn't want to weaponize scripture even in our
Yeah,
self-defense
yeah,
because we're Christians and we recognize that all Christians are members of the mystical body of Christ.
exactly.
I'm not a special Christian because I'm a descendant of the first.
Absolutely. And I think at the essential, like the very heart of Christianity, and that was like a revolutionary idea back in the ancient time in the Near East, is the idea that we are created in the image of God, right? Like there was all these pagan gods who are arguing, like, all sort of myths about creation. But here's this God saying that I created you in my image. You have agency. You are just like me, all of you, even those who don't believe. And I think that is a very essential to our Christian faith. If we believe that we're created in the image of God and everyone is equal to us, then this would motivate how we approach these things. So I don't have to argue that I'm descendant of this or descendant of that. I mean, look, Jesus, when he argued with the Pharisees, he said, like, you argue that you are the children of Abraham. God can create from these stones children of Abraham. And what is the idea there? The idea is he's clearly saying your heritage, your ancestors, whatever, does not matter. What matters is how you follow God and your heart. And everyone is equal. I mean, look how he treated the Samaritan woman. Look how he treated, the Canaanite woman, etc. There's all these examples in the Bible of God literally saying to us all these old ways of thinking that, being an Israelite or being a Samaritan or whatever cares matters. It actually does not. What matters is your heart and the fact that you are, approaching God with humility.
That's beautiful. I want to ask you two final questions. One's going to be the last one will be easy and practical, I hope. But this one's going to maybe be a little tough. And I'd ask if you just be honest. Brother, I worry about you every day.
Yeah,
I pray for you every day. You lost your father, you lost your little sister. Your family has suffered tragically and are still suffering in Gaza. You're a Christian man. I know because in the nature of my work, I have like guilt that I'm eating a Big Mac and drinking a big Coke in a, safe place. How have you, because I want us people to be able to learn from this. It's been a spiritual exercise that you've gone through in your relationship to God. And so by God's grace, I hope no one has to go through what you've gone through in their life. But can you share with us how you've grown closer to God, or have you not? Have you drifted from God, or how has witnessing people like Mike Huckabee use Jesus Christ to justify the slaughter
yeah,
of your relatives, your own sister and your dad?
yeah.
How has this impacted your relationship with God?
I would say my relationship with God has been up and down, to be honest. There are moments where you feel victorious and you feel, in the sense that God is filling me with his peace, and that, no matter what happens, I'm in God's hand, and therefore, I feel discomfort. There are many moments that, like the writer of the Psalms, and it like he feels like, where are you, God? You've forsaken me. You turned your face on me. I feel like this many times. I feel like God has turned his face on me. I feel alone because all what happened in Palestine is horrible. And then what's happening here too against me, and the fact that I'm tribeless, right? Like I don't belong to a group or to another in a sense. Even within the church has tribes, and I don't feel like I belong to anyone. That is also a challenge. But in addition, to the spiritual element to it, there is a psychological element. And I mean, I'm not ashamed to say that I've been dealing with like a major depression for like the last year and a half at least. And there are many days, Jason, where I can't get up my bed, and there are many days where I'm like really feeling I don't want to live this life, and there are many days where I feel that just everything I do is nothing, and I'm not worth anything. Um, and for that, I try to also like seek psychological help beside the spiritual help.
You know, brother, not that this will be any comfort to you, but when you lose a loved one to a drunk driver, or your child dies of cancer, your wife dies in childbirth, your husband doesn't come home from work because of a car accident or an aneurysm, the office. You know, what I always tell people is the one thing that's going to come from this is empathy for people who experience the same thing, and only you can talk to them. And so with your organization, Agora, here's the sad fact. Wars and genocides are going to be here with us till our last breath.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you have to triumph over your suffering, not for you, but because there's going to be a Khalil in 5 years, 10 years, 12 years
Yeah.
that no, I'm not going to be able to reach him. He's going to look at me and go, you don't know. How can you tell me, Jason Jones? You don't know. And he's right. But you know. You know. And so I just believe that everything you're suffering is going to be a blessing to someone else who's going to be in your shoes one day.
Amen.
And I just want to thank you for that, brother.
Thank you, Jason. I
And
appreciate
then my
it.
last question is just practical. You know, how can we support you? How can the Jason Jones Show audience, what are your initiatives coming up? What can we do to
You're
support?
really like supporting me great deal, and very much appreciate that, Jason. Like if anyone is in Washington D.C. and on November 8th we're showing No Other Land, the Oscar-winning film, and then me and my Jewish friend actually having a panel discussing the reality of life in the West Bank under the Israeli occupation and continuous settler violence and terrorism. So you're here, come to the show. That'll be great. Also, you can find me on Twitter, Khalil at Khalil Jarius. You can also like find me on Agora's website. That is the agorainitiative.org.
And I'm going to put that all in the show notes. We're going to break the third wall. This show is going to appear, unfortunately, after your event.
Oh,
And I'm banking the show for my traveling, but it's gonna air next week. So right after
excellent.
your event. But I'll be in DC next week. And I hope we definitely get to spend
Hope
some
we
time
see you then.
together. I miss you, and it's really strange. It's a mystery to me that the best friends I have in my life are all my heroes, and they're people I got to meet because of disaster, catastrophe, and tragedy. And we're friends through a catastrophe. But I'm just
Thank you,
grateful
Jason.
for friendship. And if there's VPP is always here, and we'll always be willing to do whatever we can. We can't do
Thank
much,
you.
can't do everything, but we promise that if we can do it, we will.
I appreciate your support and your friendship, Jason, always.
All right, brother. Well, I'm going to land this plane. You can stick around while I close it out, and we can talk after, but I'm going to wrap the show up right now. All right, brother. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank
Hello.
you. Thank you.
All right, guys. I'm so glad that you watched till the end. And I hope you share this with people because this is a challenging time. And my show is very small. And I often get influential people that say, I love your show. Why isn't your show growing? And I say, I don't think it'll ever grow to what you folks want it to be because we speak against the enthusiasms and currents of the age. I'm not going to put my show up like a kite and try to catch those violent winds because I think they're destructive. What we want to do is face into these winds and speak to them. And that's what the show does. And so I want as many people to see the show as possible. So please share it because the rise of Jew hatred and anti-Semitism is vile and it is satanic. But guess what? So is what is seen to be acceptable. Smearing Palestinians, smearing Arabs, smearing Muslims. People will say, whoa. They'll always ask me, you're advocating for the Christian Palestinians. No. I am advocating for the Palestinian people who are facing an ethnic cleansing. And then they look at me strange, like, wait, that's too far. No, it's not too far. Maybe not far enough. And as always, the show is being brought to you by the Vulnerable People Project. We have a very simple mission: to stand between the vulnerable and the violent, to advocate for them. We do it in two ways. We promote human dignity and we inspire solidarity. We founded this organization in 2002 with that simple message, a simple mission that will advocate for the vulnerable by promoting their dignity and asking others to stand in solidarity with them. And you can do that by going to our website, vulnerablepeopleproject.com. Look around. I am so grateful to be a part of this organization and to be a part of our work. Look around and see what we do and ask yourself, would you be grateful to be a part of work like this? And if so, click on the donate button and donate. And also go into the show notes and we will have Khalil's website for his Agora organization in the show notes. Follow him on social media and support his work, which is directed specifically for advocating for the Palestinian people. All right, until next time, from our new studios, high above the Vulnerable People Project studios, which I should tell you is on the first floor. So not that high, maybe sea level. This has been the Jason Jones Show. Aloha.